The year is 1861. A nation forged on ideals of liberty and equality finds itself on the precipice of a devastating internal conflict. The United States of America, a young republic still grappling with its identity, is about to be torn asunder. The issue at the heart of this impending crisis, slavery. But the road to civil war was paved with more than just this moral quandary. It was a path riddled with complex economic disparities, political compromises, and escalating social tensions. Each step towards disunion was marked by fervent debate, escalating mistrust, and ultimately, the grim realization that a house divided against itself cannot stand. The North, with its burgeoning industrial economy, increasingly viewed slavery as morally repugnant and economically antiquated. The South, however, clung fiercely to the institution, viewing it as the backbone of its agrarian economy and a cornerstone of its social order. At the heart of the North-South divide lay a stark economic reality. The North, with its bustling factories and growing urban centers, was experiencing an industrial revolution. Its economy thrived on manufacturing, trade, and wage labor. Slavery, while not entirely absent, was on the decline and viewed by many Northerners as incompatible with their vision of a free labor society. The South, in contrast, remained tethered to an agrarian economy heavily reliant on slave labor. Vast cotton plantations, the engine of the Southern economy, depended on enslaved people to cultivate and harvest their crops. The South's dependence on slave labor shaped its social structure and political ideology. The planter class, a small but powerful elite, held significant political and economic power. They fiercely defended slavery, arguing that it was essential to their way of life and the prosperity of the South. As the nation grappled with the issue of slavery, the political arena became a battleground for competing interests. The delicate balance of power between slave and free states was constantly under threat, leading to a series of compromises that aimed to quell the rising tide of sectionalism. These compromises, however, often served as mere bandages, failing to address the underlying tensions and ultimately contributing to the growing divide. One such compromise was the Missouri Compromise of 1820. This agreement admitted Missouri to the Union as a slave state, while Maine entered as a free state, thus maintaining the balance in the Senate. Additionally, the compromise prohibited slavery north of the 3630 parallel, effectively dividing future territories into potential slave or free states. While intended to preserve unity, the Missouri Compromise only served to highlight the growing sectionalism and the contentious nature of slavery expansion. Section 4. Seeds of Discontent. Key Events. As the nation lurched from one crisis to another, a series of key events further inflamed tensions and pushed the nation closer to the brink. These events, often violent and always divisive, exposed the fragility of the compromises and the deep-seated animosity that had taken root. One such event was the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. This act, championed by Senator Stephen Douglas, allowed for popular sovereignty in the territories of Kansas and Nebraska, meaning residents would vote to determine whether slavery would be permitted. This ignited a firestorm of controversy, as pro-slavery and anti-slavery forces flooded into Kansas, leading to widespread violence and bloodshed. Adding fuel to the fire was the Dred Scott decision of 1857. In this landmark case, the Supreme Court ruled that African Americans, whether free or enslaved, were not considered citizens and therefore had no standing to sue in federal court. Section 5. The Peculiar Institution, Slavery's Central Role. While economic and political factors played significant roles in the road to the Civil War, it was the institution of slavery that stood as the central, undeniable catalyst for conflict. For millions of African Americans, however, it represented a brutal system of oppression, denying them their basic human rights and subjecting them to a life of forced labor, degradation, and violence. The abolitionist movement, primarily based in the North, gained momentum throughout the early 19th century. Abolitionists, driven by moral outrage and a belief in the inherent equality of all people, condemned slavery as a sin and called for its immediate abolition. They published newspapers, delivered fiery speeches, and aided runaway slaves through the Underground Railroad, challenging the South's economic and moral justifications for slavery. The South, however, remained defiant in its defense of slavery. Section 6. A collision course. The years leading up to the Civil War witnessed a series of escalating crises, each pushing the nation closer to the brink. The chasm between North and South widened, fueled by mistrust, animosity, and the fundamental disagreement over the institution of slavery. The formation of the Republican Party in 1854 signaled a turning point in American politics. Born out of opposition to the Kansas-Nebraska Act and the expansion of slavery, the Republican Party quickly gained traction in the North. The election of Abraham Lincoln, a Republican who campaigned on a platform of preventing the expansion of slavery, in 1860 proved to be the final straw for many Southerners. Seeing Lincoln's victory as a threat to their way of life and the institution of slavery, 11 Southern states seceded from the Union, forming the Confederate States of America. Section 7. The Inevitable Storm. On April 12, 1861, Confederate forces fired upon Fort Sumter in Charleston, South Carolina, marking the beginning of the American Civil War. The conflict, 4 years in the making, had finally erupted, pitting brother against brother in a bloody struggle for the soul of a nation. The war, rooted in the deep-seated division over slavery, would claim the lives of over 600,000 Americans and leave an indelible scar on the nation's psyche. While the war ultimately ended slavery and preserved the Union, its echoes reverberate to this day, reminding us of the fragility